All right, we're going to be starting our little webinar with one of my favorite people and with Jessica. And we are in the month of May, the American Cheese Society American Cheese Month. And so we're going to be with Jessica Little with Sweetgrass Dairy today. And she's got some really fun things to talk about. Plus, we have an amazing array of cheeses today to be able to taste. So hopefully you got a chance to be able to do that. All right. So welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm so happy for the invitation to be here. So thank you. There you go. And here's some of in our creamery here with those curds and those wheels. And that's Bernardo. He's been making cheese with us for almost 7 years now, who we're so thankful for. And but the milk was so different. It had this really different flavor profile that was really grassy and earthy, and the higher butterfat content from the Jersey cows. And so cheese was just a really good vehicle to show off and tell the story of rotational grazing and sustainable agriculture and humane animal husbandry. So we started making cheese in 2000. You can go to that next slide. And we learned how to make cheese. My husband Jeremy is a cheesemaker, and he learned how to make cheese from a French cheesemaker named Jean-Marc. And he is from the Pyrenees mountain region of France. So the very first style that we learned how to make was a Tomme, or farmhouse style. And after that, almost all of our recipes have been very French in style. So we make this green hill, you can see on the screen here, that is in a double cream cow's milk style with this white bloomy rind. So in the same family as a camembert or a brie, not necessarily either one of those things. It's its own kind of unique cheese. I don't necessarily think that we invent anything. We just kind of discover vehicles of being able to show off our milk. And Green Hill was a way to do that, to show off that really rich Jersey cow's milk. And then we have progressed and made other cheeses, again, in that very old world style. And just wanted to, at the end of the day, Jeremy will say that his goal as a cheesemaker, after my parents have worked so hard to make the highest quality milk, it's his job to just not mess it up. So he really wants to make cheeses that the true flavors of the grass and the earth really just shine through, and that you can taste it no matter what style that you have.
You know, I did a seminar in Jacksonville with this particular cheese, and it got postponed. So the cheese was running a little longer in time-wise than typically we plan on. It wasn't expired, but it was right at that edge. And I have to say that this cheese got so gooey and rich, and everybody was just blown away by that. So this is a lot of ability from being a little chalky starting out to creamy to overall really gooey. The rind has got a beautiful button mushroom smell to it. You can smell the butter in the paste. It's just a magnificent little bloomy rind, and I really adore it. You look at what you can put with this, and this is one of the cheeses that stand on their own, that you want to just savor and enjoy. And a lot of times people are afraid of, well, I bring out the brie, now I'm bringing out the holidays, I'm bringing out the thing that is really special. They're all special. They all need to come out all the time, not just for a special occasion.
Sure. Well, I would agree with you. As far as out of all of our cheeses, we sell more Green Hill than anything else. Green Hill is named after my parents' first New Zealand rotational style dairy, and now they have 3. So we are able to farm, get milk from 3 different farms, and depending on what lactation cycle we want to pull the milk from to make cheese, which is really advantageous as cheesemakers, because it's very difficult to make consistent cheese with very early lactation and late lactation milk. So we like the flexibility of being able to pull from whichever farm that we like. But we wanted, to make a cheese that, again, our biggest challenge of being in South Georgia is the heat. And so we live right on top of an aquifer, so we cannot, build down into the ground. Actually, here in Thomasville, no one has basements or anything like that, so we couldn't really put caves in under the ground. So it costs a lot of money to run coolers, and we really wanted to show off again that rich, buttery Jersey-based milk, and Green Hill was a really good vehicle for that. I have a very special place in my heart for Green Hill because we sell more of it than anything else, and it's named after my parents' flagship dairy. But I also, Michael, as you mentioned, I like how it changes, just soft ripened cheeses in general. And I guess all cheeses develop as they age, but I like that you can see it, with soft ripened cheeses, they do start so firm, almost like cutting butter, cold butter, and then they ripen over time, that breakdown there underneath the rind, that proteolysis and lipolysis to give you different flavor profiles throughout the time period. But I really love Green Hill because it has so many different flavors. It's very complex in that, as you know, there's so much flavor in the fat. And so with this much fat, you get a sweetness, from the milk, but then you also get this, when you acidify milk to make cheese, there's a slight soured note to it, like creme fraiche or something in there. And then the rind with that Penicillium candidum, it provides a slight bitterness to it. And then when you have higher fat content, you typically need to add a little bit more salt to help balance that, or else it's not super, or it can be over bitter. So you get a saltiness from a double cream cheese, and then there's just so much umami at the end of the day. So Green Hill to me is really fun because there's so much going on, even for a young pasteurized cheese. There's a lot of complexity, and we've done different with different restaurants and winemakers over the years, and I've seen a very wide range of wines and beers that pair with Green Hill, which is really fun. You would think that it would just be like a Chardonnay or a champagne, but there's been some really cool out of the box pairings. What do you pair beer wise with the Green Hill?
Well, at this exact second, I have a Irish Red. This is a local brewery. This is 81 Bay out here in Tampa. And red ales work really well across the board. Matter of fact, they'll work with everything here. They react very differently with each one, but there's a lot of maltiness to this particular beer, to a red. And so there's a little bit of hoppiness, but it's really minor in the big scheme of things, where you really want that maltiness. So it started off with a little bit of tanginess, and then I added in the beer, and you really pick up more of the butter. The mushroom kind of drops down a little bit, but you really get this intense buttery flavor with the beer. So you get butter and malt, and maybe even a little molasses that comes through. So it's really quite interesting to have those two together.
Nice. Do you think it makes the beer any better, or does the beer just enhance the cheese?
I think it does both. I think you get, with the beer, like I said, it had a little bit of hoppiness in it. And so with the cheese, it kind of takes out that hoppiness and brings that malt up. So you get more malt, you get more butter, you get more molasses. You get all these little things that kind of come in and accent the flavors when you're working with that.
Nice. I always enjoy talking to you about beer pairings because you know so much about beer and cheese.
I drink a lot of beer, so and I eat a lot of cheese, so that kind of helps, when working with that.
Nice, nice. Well, good. Yes, that's Green Hill. Again, it's I try to stay away from saying our flagship cheese, but it is the one that most people know us for. It's the one that really helped put us on the map as far as in the artisan cheese world, and the one that I think we make the most consistently. As cheesemakers, we struggle so much trying to make a consistent product with very inconsistent raw materials. And so it has been really hard to make this cheese consistently every single day with changing seasonality and lactation cycles and, you know, different staff members and that sort of thing. So it's been hard, but we're trying to figure it out. And then we're moving right on to Thomasville Tomme. So Thomasville Tomme is an uncooked, unpressed, natural rind, aged cow's milk cheese. So again, this was the first cheese that we ever learned how to make from a French cheesemaker from the Pyrenees Mountains. And like you said earlier, Michael, to me, it's a good gateway cheese into artisan cheeses because it's not too strong. But Liz Thorpe said it really well one time, and she said, I really appreciate it. She was like, although it's very mild, it is not lacking in flavor. So there is a complexity to Thomasville Tomme, and I find that most sommeliers tend to really like this cheese. I think it's because it's got a lot of subtle layers of flavors. And again, our goal is always to let the natural flavors of the milk shine through. So we want you to be able to taste that grassiness. And probably the best story that I can reiterate this is when I was in college, before I even moved back to the farm, I was working in a cheese shop in Atlanta just to learn more about cheeses and understand, you know, our industry. And I was helping at the counter and a customer, and there were a couple of coworkers behind me that were unpacking boxes and unpacking different cheeses. And I was standing there talking to a customer, and then all of a sudden I smelled the pastures from home. I smelled the farm, and I turned around and I was like, oh my gosh. And they had just opened a box from Sweetgrass Dairy. It was our cheeses. And I get a lot of that in our Thomasville Tomme, of just that grassiness of the pasture. So this cheese, like I said, is not, it is very mild, and we find that you can use it in such a wide range of applications. We melt it in just about any recipe that you can think of because unlike cheddar, it doesn't separate and get oily. It really has a very soft melt, and it goes really well in everything from, I mean, my children make quesadillas and, you know, tacos and grilled cheese sandwiches with Thomasville Tomme, but really, really, really versatile. And again, going back to different wine and cheese pairings, I've seen anything from, you know, Chiantis and a lot of Pinot Noirs, and then a lot of unoaked Chardonnays and Viogniers, all really, really delicious with Thomasville Tomme.
Well, I have to say the red still works really well with this. What's interesting is that you can really taste some saltiness in here. And you have a wonderful butter. You know, the butter on here is just incredible. And again, you can smell the fields. You can smell the earthiness on this rind, which, you know, growing up in Iowa was, you know, in the fields and all that. That's just, like you said, at the shop, as soon as you open it up, you can smell that. And it's just a wonderful earthiness that just prevails. And then the butter, and then there's some tang. And like I said, there was a little bit of saltiness to it, but with the beer, you know, a little saltiness on the beer really brings up that maltiness again. So you get that nice malt, the sweetness, the butter here. So, you know, one of my favorites is, you know, putting these two together, having a nice red. You know, a black lager would work really well, you know, but, you know, this is such a lovely cheese to have, to bring to your friends, to any occasion, just even having it for snacking. You know, when I get done with this, this cheese board comes out and we get to sit and graze tonight. I actually believe that this is going to be my dinner tonight. So,
Nice.
and it's a magnificent dinner.
Nice. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's Thomasville Tomme. It's named after our hometown. So Thomasville, a lot of people don't know where Thomasville is because it's a very small town. We have 50,000 people in our whole county. But the way I best describe it to people when I'm traveling around the country and talking about cheese is that we're almost exactly halfway between Atlanta and Orlando. So we're 4 hours north of Orlando and about 4 hours south of Atlanta. So in the southwest part of the state. And Thomasville is our hometown. So the Thomasville Tomme is an homage to our hometown.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so like I said, it's the first cheese that Jeremy ever learned how to make. And sometimes, you know, I don't know if you've heard this a lot. You were also in the restaurant industry, but a lot of chefs will say that the hardest technique to learn as a chef is restraint. And I think Thomasville Tomme is a good example of Jeremy really trying to learn that his biggest skill set is, you know, the biggest technique that he could get to the cheeses is actually restraint, just not overworking them, and let the milk really speak for itself.
Absolutely. All right.
And then I think that's a good segue. I'd love to, if it's okay with you, Michael, to kind of start talking about the pimento cheese, actually, since we use Thomasville Tomme in that recipe. You know, if you grew up in the South, like myself, I didn't have a really great love affair with pimento cheese because I was just used to my grandmother making these really bad little tea sandwiches after church or after school. And it was this bland kind of mayonnaise-y spread that didn't really taste that great. And we opened a cheese shop in downtown Thomasville in 2010, and we wanted some different spreads or dips that we could put out. We had 3 little tables in the back where people could sit down, have a glass of wine or a beer with some cheeses. And somebody said, you know, we really should make our own pimento cheese. And Jeremy, who's actually from Ohio, he's not from the South, was not raised in the South, thought, gosh, if I'm going to make pimento cheese, I want to make the absolute best pimento cheese that I can. So he said, you know what, we're going to make it with Thomasville Tomme, which is, you know, raw milk cheese. This is the only raw milk pimento cheese that we know of on the market. And we're going to use really great mayonnaise, and we're going to use piquillo peppers and pimenton from Spain, a little bit of Dijon mustard. So we have a little bit of a kick to it with some of that smokiness from the pimenton. And the pimento cheese we just made in the cheese shop for several years. And then on a dare, I dared Jeremy to enter the pimento cheese into the ACS competition. And I can't remember if it was 2016. I believe it was 2016. I'm not sure. But I was just like, you know what, just put it in the competition in the flavored spreads and just see what happens. And we were so shocked that year. It got a 99 out of 100. So we were like, we might be onto something here with this pimento cheese. And so we have since, you know, started selling it into different retailers. But it's really fun for me to take it on the road anytime I go on a sales trip or anything, and I taste with a chef, and they always think, gosh, pimento cheese is so pedestrian. And you know, it is, but it also can be really high quality, and it also is the cheese of the South. We do not have a long history of cheese making in the South before refrigeration, and this is the way that Southerners ate cheese. So I'm quite fond of our pimento cheese. We've been making it now for 10 years, and I eat it all the time. I'm not sick of it one bit. We sell it. The cheese shop now has turned into a full service restaurant. And our number one selling item is a pimento cheese bourbon bacon jam burger. That is like a nap on a plate, but it is so delicious and lends itself really well, like on pimento cheese and grilled cheese sandwiches, on burgers as a spread. I mean, I don't know. How about you? Do you eat a lot of pimento cheese, Michael?
I have a couple that I kind of play around with. I make my own, and I'm just whatever cheeses that I happen to have that would be appropriate is basically how I make it myself, being that it's a relatively simple recipe. So most often it's just something that I would whip up, kind of like, you know, a grilled cheese sandwich or something like that, whatever happens to be around is going to be there. And but honestly, the spiciness to this is right on the perfect edge because, you know, I still taste a little bit of that, but it's not overbearing. It's got a little bit of sweetness with that just little bit of mayonnaise. Then, of course, the Thomasville Tomme in there is exceptional. And what I think is amazing is that, you know, on a lot of these, you run into that fact that, you know, it's all blended together, and you can really see the chunks of cheese in this and how thick that is.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm using the brewer's crackers. This is actually made out of spent grain from making beer. So, you know, kind of the whole circle there, being able to do that. But, you know, I want something that's going to stand up to the pimento cheese. And I also, I don't want it breaking when I'm dipping it in there.
Well, good. Yeah, it's to me, I think pimento cheese is such a good party cheese. It's good in, you know, group whenever we can all get back together and socialize. It's a fun one. And at least in my experience when we've done some different dinners, one time I never think of offering this cheese when we do these different dinners with sommeliers and winemakers. And there was a winemaker that was like, you know what, I want to work with pimento cheese. And we were at Sea Island, which is, you know, really fancy resort and here in Georgia. And they asked for a pairing that was a Mayacamas Cabernet Sauvignon. So a really, really high-end Cabernet with the pimento cheese. And it was so fun, that juxtaposition between this like really high-end Napa cab and this very pedestrian, you know, very beloved Southern ingredient that a lot of the other country, you know, parts of the country really are just now turning on to pimento cheese. It was really fun. So I have since changed my mind on whether or not pimento cheese is a good wine pairing option. It really brings out kind of that smokiness and meatiness in wine. So it's pretty fun.
I have a friend in Seattle, and one of her, I guess, indulgences is champagne and crispy French fries. So, you know, sometimes doesn't have to be, you know, the equivalent of a filet mignon or something really crazy. Sometimes just these simple pleasures work really well.
Absolutely. Those comfort foods. I agree. For sure. Well, I'm going to jump to Asher Blue since you hinted at it earlier. And I love telling the story of Asher Blue because I very much believe that every cheesemaker or every winemaker or every beer maker, they all tasted a cheese, a wine, a beer that changed their lives, that inspired them to learn more and to dive deeper into that world of cheeses, wines, beers, whatever. And for Jeremy, it was blue cheese. He tasted Roquefort for the first time and just thought, oh my gosh, I love this Roquefort. It's so delicious. What is this unique blue flavor profile? And so when we started making cheese, we did not have a blue, and people cautioned us and said, whatever you do, don't make blue. It's so difficult. You're balancing culture and mold. It's so finicky. It needs the right, you know, aging environment. And we are hard-headed enough. And I also encourage Jeremy, I was like, if you're going to make cheese, make things that you love, because people will see that. It's very transparent. And so he kept working on blue for years and years. And Asher Blue, I think we first started making it in maybe 2004, 2005. And it's named after our second son, who was born in 2004. And he wanted to make a raw milk, natural rind, non-homogenized blue, which is so hard to do. It's maybe one of the most difficult styles of blue to make. And he really liked that creamy, crumbly texture. So it's not that we don't like homogenized blues. We actually really love them. So thinking of like gorgonzola or something with that really fudgy texture. We like the creamy, crumbly. We also did not have the homogenizer at the farm. So it just made it easier to decide to make this style. But again, I think that blue cheese lends itself so well to our flavor profile. So unlike some other blue cheeses, like one of my other absolute favorite blue cheeses is Point Reyes Bay Blue. I think it has some really great sweet notes to it. The Asher, I believe, is a little bit more savory in comparison. You get more of that like mushroomy components like you were talking about earlier, and grassy, earthy. And sometimes I really do get on the finish some notes of cocoa, but it really, really, I think, shows off our very unique grass-based milk really, really well. And it's also, like I said, a cheese that is very, very close to our hearts, that we genuinely love making, and it tells our story really well.
You know, blues, as a judge at the International Cheese Awards and all that, blues is one of my categories that I get to judge in, and I really adore them. And you know, what's really funny is that when you start talking to people about blue, you know, you get that comment, it's, oh, I tried blue and I found it to be whatever, blah, blah, too strong and all that. And you know, I tell them, it's like going into the grocery store and walking into the produce department and picking up a vegetable and taking a bite and saying, I don't like vegetables. But you only tried that one. Well, they're all vegetables, you know? So blues are so radically different, you know, from the creamy gorgonzolas all the way up through the different styles. And I think that, you know, where you guys are is that this is a really easy to eat, well balanced blue. There isn't you know, this screaming tanginess or saltiness to it. It has a really nice balance of flavors. There's butter, there's mushroom, there's a nice earthiness to it. And I agree that you know, with Bay Blue, they're very similar. Bailey Hazen, I think, is very, very close. Is the same area, more earthy than they are that blue, tangy, salty stuff. And this has really got a lot of depth to it. And it's just also the bluing in here is just so beautiful. You know, I mean, you know, when you look at cheeses, a lot of times to be able to get that quality of the bluing in here, you know, it's not all in one spot. It's all over. It's nice and balanced, and it's just a beautiful cheese overall. And you know, the first thing that I like about it is, you know, pairing with it would be honey, of course, and you know, Savannah bee honey in Georgia, you know, does a fabulous job. Some of the highest quality honey that you can get. It's just amazing. And just a little bit of sweetness on here. And then, of course, you know, with the red ale, you're still going to get all that maltiness in there. Now, you know, a lot of people are afraid of the rind. So what do you say about the rind here?
So that's a really great question. And, you know, one of my most eye-opening experiences is when we have had European cheesemakers that have come travel to the United States and they come to the farm, and we do a cheese tasting at the end, which is, it's always the most nerve-wracking time, because here you've got these French cheesemakers that are, you know, incredible. They've been making cheese for generations or whatever, and they're tasting your cheese, and we've been making it for less than 20 years. And you think, oh my gosh, there's no way we're going to compare. And, you know, I'm holding my breath, and they'll get a piece of cheese and they'll smell the rind first, and they'll feel it, and they'll smell the other side. And the first bite that they take or that I've seen is from the rind on the outside. As they said, you can get so much of that microflora. You know, cheeses are living things, and you know, these rinds on the outside there's a lot of flavor in there. But as Americans, we always eat from, I think, the inside out, which is completely fine. I am of the school of thought that cheese is meant to bring joy and flavor, and however you want to enjoy it is the absolute right way. So those people that really like to eat the rind on Breeze, then knock yourself out. And if you don't, then scoop it out and enjoy it in the best way that you can. So it is completely edible though. We do not use any sort of wax or plastic or anything like that.
It is just, the earthiness on this is so pleasant. It's kind of like a portobello mushroom. It's got some earthiness to it. It's got some sweetness to it. A lot of times you're right about people going to the center, but what most people think about is that the center is going to be the creamiest. It's going to be the most buttery. So starting off with that, it has a tendency to dry out or get a little bit more earthy as you get closer to the rind. But, this has got such a nice balance, whether you're eating it from the center or whether you're eating it from the end. It's such a beautiful and easy to eat cheese. And I think that a lot of people that are maybe afraid of a blue, this would be a good way to be able to start it. And, I guess my question would be is, if you really like mushrooms, that earthiness of mushrooms that you get out of there, I think that this would be really what direction you're to go. And then you get the butter, and then you get a little bit of saltiness. So sauteed mushrooms,
Right.
roasted mushrooms.
Yes. And so people have asked me, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense would you classify Asher Blue? And to me, it looks a lot more intense than it actually is. It's usually, in my opinion, around a 4 or 5 in intensity. It's not like a Cabrales or anything that's going to be really funky and with that really pungent bite to it. I do think that you're right. We definitely, it does have some bluing, but we want to see a lot of the yellow of the paste of the cheese. And I think a good note here to make is that cows process beta carotene from the grass in a way that you can see the yellow in the cheese. So all of our cheeses are going to be more of a yellow color due to the beta carotene in the grass that the cows are eating, versus if we were to feed our cows silage or grain in a barn. So you can see that really bright yellow. Michael, would you also agree that Asher Blue is more in that 4 to 5 out of a scale of 10 range on strong flavors?
When you start trying to classify cheeses like that, everybody's palate is a little different. Sensitivity. I mean, some people find Brussels sprouts to be too strong. So it really depends. Using that kind of gauge, and that's what I was kind of saying about the mushrooms. That kind of earthiness in there. And they kind of bring out some strength to them. But by no means is this a strong or an overpowering blue. As a matter of fact, the aroma on here is very similar to the Thomasville Tomme, that has that wonderful earthiness to it. There's no stink, no strong smell. It has a nice, really pleasant earthiness. And so, yeah, I guess all coming around, it would be right in the middle there. It's not mild, it's not strong, so it would be right in the middle of the blue world. And
well, good. Yes. And my funny story about Asher is that, like I mentioned to you earlier, that it is named after our second son, whose name is Asher. He is now 15 and working a lot on the farm because he needs to stay busy. But he is one of 4 boys. We have 4 boys. He's the second. And we've made cheeses named after our first son and our third son as well. We're working on a cheese to name after our 4th son right now. But the one that is the most popular of the cheeses that are named after the kids is Asher. And so we will go into a restaurant somewhere and they'll have Asher Blue on the menu. And he loves to tease his brothers that he is way more popular than they are because his cheese has been more popular than the other ones. So maybe that's just some brotherly love there. We launched it, I guess, in 2017. So we've been working on this recipe For us, it usually takes about 2 years minimum to develop a cheese. There you go. And Griffin is named after our third son. His nickname is Finn. And we wanted to make a cheese that had a little bit firmer texture, that had something a little bit more like cheddar, but without having to make a cheddar process. And we wanted to do something to the cheese that would add a flavor component that was complementary to the grass, but that just something that was really unique. And what we came up with is this process of a uncooked but pressed cheese where the curds are washed in beer. So Griffin, the cheese making process starts its life very similarly to the Thomasville Tomme, and except for we are building acidity a little bit faster, and we cut the curds a lot smaller so that we expel more whey. And then after we separate the curds in the whey, the curds is a lot drier than the Thomasville Tomme where we're trying to trap in more moisture. We pour in a whole keg of Terminus Porter, which is a porter, a Baltic porter style, made at Gate City Brewing in Roswell, Georgia, so just north of Atlanta. And we were looking for a porter style that was made year-round that had those really great malty notes of coffee and chocolate that were more rich. So I think this was a really fun process for Jeremy because he was trying all of these different beers. And we found that IPAs, as you can imagine, were way too bitter, bringing out bitter notes of the cheese. But the porters and stouts really complemented that grassiness. And so we pour a whole keg of beer in there, let the curds swim around for a while, and then drain the beer off. And then this cheese actually is pressed all together. So it has a very closed texture, as you can see. And then the outside of the rind, we wash actually twice with beer throughout its lifespan. So the Thomasville Tomme, we will launch, or we will usually release it from the farm somewhere between 60 and say 120 days is the hard target. And the Griffin, we will not even release until 120 days. We want to age it a little bit longer. We want it to have a little bit more flavor development and a little bit more sharpness. But it's been interesting seeing, like, geographically, we find that this cheese does really well on the West Coast, where I think people are used to drinking more hoppy style beers or stronger flavor profiles because it does have an inherent little slight bitterness to it. But it's been a fun cheese because we've never made one quite with this cheddar-like texture, and really trying to enhance. So I think up front you get a little bit more of the beer, and then you get more of that grassiness kind of on the finish. What would you say?
There's a burnt maple that's in here. That's very pleasant. It's not a bad burn. It's a caramelized maple that is really striking. That's so different than the Thomasville Tomme. I mean, radically different. I would say that it's kind of like an aged Gouda without the caramel. It's got that really rich maple flavor. It's rime. It's got a beautiful smell to it. It's a little stronger than earthy, but you got some of that beer yeast that's in there. Gives it a really nice flavor. As a brewer, when you're boiling your wort, you get this really great maple flavor throughout the brewery, and that's what you really get here is that maple richness to it. There's a little bit of tanginess, a little bit of salt, but this doesn't fit in any traditional category. In other words, if you're saying, well, it's kind of like, tastes like a Gouda, but it's kind of like a cheddar, but it's also like a farmstead. It's really branches out there. I don't really see a pigeonhole for it. I think it's just something that people that want a little bit more of a robust cheese without being strong, having that caramelized maple is very, very pleasant. It's not sweet. There's a little bit of acidity on it, so it's balanced very, very well with the red ale, with the maple. Yeah, this is definitely a good beer cheese. And you could do an IPA with this. I think that what would happen is that depending on how hoppy, like if you're Centennial or Cascade hops with that pininess in there, I think it would neutralize it and really give a nice balance, give you a little bit more of the grain out of the IPA and less of the hoppiness, because this has got a lot of power to it.
Yes. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head for us. We've really struggled. If we've talked about potentially entering this cheese into different competitions, but we don't know where to put it. It's if you put it in a flavored category, it's not strong enough to really say that it's flavored. But then if you put it in a regular category, there's definitely a flavor to it. So it really doesn't have quite a home. We did win a Good Food Award for it, but as our practices and all what goes into making the cheese, which we're so proud of. But it is a very difficult cheese to kind of pigeonhole and figure out exactly where to put it. Again, cheese has been around for so many thousands of years that I don't believe that anybody invents anything. I think we, more or less discover along the way. And this was a really fun project. And it's actually my favorite day that they're making cheese in the cheese plant. You walk in and it smells like a mochaccino. Or like a mocha. It just smells so good. As those warm cheese curds and beer and all of that going on. It's great.
But, with the selection of cheeses, the diversity here is magnificent. The Thomasville Tomme in its lightness, and the Griffin in its intensity, the blue being earthy. But what comes out in all of these, and every single time I taste this, I got the earth and grassiness and the butter. You really taste that out of here. And when you said that about vegetables, about a lot of times they're being bland and they don't have that depth, sometimes cheeses taste good, but they don't have any depth. But this has got a lot of depth to it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I guess Jeremy's mission is successful with these cheeses. We'll keep them around for now. Gosh. I would say probably if I want to pair it with a wide range of cheeses, I'm probably going to go with more unoaked or neutral oaked Chardonnay or something like that, like from Macon. I do love, actually what I'm drinking today is a Verdicchio from Kermit Lynch. I like the slight bitterness on a Verdicchio, and kind of the salinity kind of brings it out. So not a lot of oak, but can go well with a wide range of cheeses. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell our story and to share our cheeses. And I've learned so much about beer today. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And it's always a pleasure with you, Jessica. And, take care. Give, my love around the family. And hopefully we'll be seeing each other somewhere on the road. And again, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Well, cheers. It's Friday afternoon. Sorry.
Cheers.
Happy
It
hour.
is Friday afternoon. All right. All next week, Monday through Friday, I have an entire group coming through. On Tuesday, it's going to be chaos because I'll have Allison Hooper, Mary Keene, and Peggy Smith from Cowgirl. So, we're just going to hang on the seat of our pants on that one. But seems like it'll be fun. Looking forward to that. And you guys take care. And I'll see you at 4 o'clock somewhere in the month of May. Bye now.
Bye.